Welcome to another episode of Just More Fix. This is James. With me in this episode is Lacey.
Hey.
You can find us online at justmorefix.com or on Twitter at justmorefix. If you like us, you can support us at Patreon, and you can give us a rating and review at iTunes or wherever you find us at. In this episode, we're going to talk about stepping out of the limelight for others to succeed. And now, it's time to get our gaming fix.
I'm Willie D. Nelson from All Things Good and Nerdy, a pop culture podcast, part of the Gonna Geek Network. Just like the show you're checking out now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other tantalizingly geeky shows at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
Welcome to another episode of Just More Fix. One quick announcement before we get things rolling today. So we missed Scene Quest last year, which actually kind of prompted us to start producing our zines for Patreon.
First of all, we did not miss it.
Okay.
We were definitely there. We purchased 50% of the zines that were available.
Actually, I think it was probably closer to 70 or 80, but that's besides the point. I digress. So we did not produce anything for Scene Quest last year because I wasn't sure about deadlines and whatnot. And I wanted to be able to take our time to actually get our first zine put together. But this year, we are going to put something together for Zine Quest. And our Kickstarter for that is going to go live on February 11th, and it will run until the 25th. And it is going to be our Three Sisters zine, which is a thing that we game stormed on episode 140. And I'll link that in the show notes so you can check it out. And it will be a traditional zine like all the old school zines were, with, black and white printing and probably 24 to 30 pages is what I'm assuming. And then with artwork and stuff that we like to bring from period woodcuts and that kind of stuff, that's all public domain. And then depending on how things go and what it looks like, we may be contracting some artwork as well. So this one is largely being put together by Lacey. So she's going to write it. I'm going to do some of the editing and then the layout stuff and all that kind of stuff. So looking forward to that. And that should be going live on the 11th, and it will close on the 25th. And we'll be tweeting that out and posting it on Facebook and all that kind of stuff. So we would love to have you support our Kickstarter and our zine, and love to have all of you out there help spread the word about it. So in addition to that, there's lots of awesome things on Zine Quest again this year. So it's all running all through February. So head over to Kickstarter if you enjoy those kind of things and check them out, because there's lots of cool things there. Right? All right on. So today we're going to talk about stepping out of the limelight to give other players or game masters or anyone basically at the table some more space to succeed and have fun and succeed, I guess, in terms of what their characters are about and made for, right? So how do you want to start this off?
Okay. So the idea for this comes from a constant complaint I hear about always being the one running games. I am the GM for my group. I'm the designated GM for my group.
Right.
I would love to play in a game, but I'm the only one that runs games. And I sort of picture the little red hen, right? Like, I sowed the wheat, I ground the wheat into flour. I baked the bread. But did you ask for help? Did you ever ask? Or are you just busy assuming that you're the only one in your group that's going to run a game? Maybe other people in your group have an interest in that, and they just know that you always run the game. Or maybe they have an interest in it and they're just afraid to run the game, because that is definitely something that happens.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
go ahead.
I don't know. I just was kind of thinking maybe people just need to get out of the way.
Right on. I wasn't even thinking about it in that kind of context, but yeah, I think you're right. It's one of those things where sometimes it's just easier to go along and do what is already established and been done, right? And sort of follow the habits of what your group has already been doing. And for a lot of groups, it seems like there's mainly one GM, and which is kind of strange, because that's not something that we've had at our tables. Now some people run more than others, but.
Okay, but to be fair, you pretty much ran all the game.
Mm-hmm.
And then we became friends with Kurt. And then Kurt had previously, for his gaming group, run all the games. So then we had like this 2 GM situation. And then I think it was a situation where like one day we sat down and we were like, well, I didn't really prep anything. I didn't necessarily have anything going on. Mm-hmm. And then I want to say that Carrie chimed in and was like, well, I could run a game. Mm-hmm. And it's just sort of snowballed from there.
Right.
And now Carrie runs most of the games at her house.
Yeah.
Lee dabbles sometimes too. And so a steady slide to all of us running games.
I know at least in Carrie's case, and you've mentioned it before too with World of Darkness, there was a long time where we played mostly World of Darkness, right? Mm-hmm. And both you and Carrie had expressed interest in running World of Darkness stuff, but you also said that you didn't want to run World of Darkness games for me because of how much experience I have with World of Darkness.
It was like intimidating, right? You're
right.
like, oh, I don't want to run a game for you and have it be terrible.
Which made me feel a couple different ways. One, it made me feel kind of bummed out because I'm like, I just want to play in a World of Darkness game. I don't really care. And then also it made me feel kind of bad because I was like, man, like, cool if you think my games are that great that you're terrified to compare to I'm glad that you guys enjoy my games.
Like, being on the other side of the table now, I could be like, okay, well, clearly you don't have any secret sauce that was unattainable. But if you never GM'd a game before,
I agree.
looks like you're doing something really
I agree.
difficult.
And I think that the only reason that the way I run World of Darkness stuff is different is because of my experience running LARP. So of all the games that I run, my LARP experience comes into my World of Darkness games more because that's how I sort of see that world now, right? So I can understand why you might think, oh, James has all this different stuff going on in his head because of that, but I really don't.
And truly, that's kind of what kicked this podcast off forever ago anyway. Like, when we first started, I had still only ran... I mean, I'd been gaming for a long time, but I'd only been running games for like maybe a year, maybe. Mm-hmm. Like, I would have to go back and listen to even know for sure. But It was sort of like sitting down with you and Kurt, who with like this master sage wisdom of GMing. And I'm like, but how do you actually do it? Right? Because it looks complicated. And I think that's part of the stepping out of the limelight thing, too, in like, it's not enough to just get out of the way. I think sometimes you need to actively ask, like, would you like to run a game? And offer, like, I could help you put a game together. Well,
let me say, and this is something that it took me a minute to be able to figure out how to express to you guys to where I felt like you actually believed me, was one, if you're talking about running a game we're all, I feel like, running games that we want to play, right? So with that is the first major conceit. If you're willing to run a game that I really like and that I want to play, but you're nervous about my knowledge of the world or whatever, part of the excitement for me, and this is maybe I should have done a better job expressing this earlier, is that one of the things that I like about World of Darkness and White Wolf is that at the time when World of Darkness was exploding everywhere, in my opinion, I felt like they had the best writers in gaming, right? Now, you can make arguments about the mechanics and all that kind of stuff, but strictly as terms of like the story and how it all kind of fit together in the world, I really felt like it was just an amazing, really fleshed out and full world. But what I like to do was have the knowledge of the world and then break those assumptions you had if you had that knowledge, right? And that's what I wanted to see, is when I sat down to play one of those games with someone else running it that didn't necessarily have all this all this
background knowledge.
Yeah, about the world. Well, how are you going to change it? Because one of my favorite things about the World of Darkness is that all the books are written with the unreliable narrator part of it, right? So when you read the clan book, it's written from the perspective of someone telling you, like as a neonate, hey, these are the things about our clan.
Completely onion.
Exactly. And they also they're not guaranteed to be true. So any of the things that you read in any of the books, well, they could be entirely wrong anyway. Right? Mm-hmm. And that's what I liked about it. It was like, sure, out of character, yeah, I have a lot of experience with World of Darkness, but it's all unreliable narrator anyway. And I like to sort of, you find different parts of that world and that story that speak to you and you sort of tweak them, right? And I've always enjoyed the characters that you guys played. So I thought, well, if you make good characters that I enjoy playing or enjoy interacting with or whatever, then surely when you make your own world for a World of Darkness game, it's going to have that same flavor that I already enjoy anyway. And I just think that maybe part of that stepping out of, like, bringing it back around to the stepping out of the limelight part is maybe actually expressing that to the people that you think might want to be running games and say, I know you're scared and intimidated by whatever, but I enjoy what you bring to the table. I would like to actively play in a game, whatever, what I'm saying? And it took me a while to sort of find a way to articulate that better, maybe. Do you know what I'm saying? Because I really, I really enjoy them because I like my view of the World of Darkness, but I like nearly everyone that we've sat down at the table with. I like their view of the World of Darkness as well. It's just different. Do you know what I'm saying? You're thinking awful hard. What?
I'm just wondering. You don't want to get everybody over for game night and just be like, well, I didn't prepare anything, so I just wonder if you're going to run a game or what.
Surprise.
So, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I'd be like, okay, just step out of the limelight the next time your players show up and see what I mean. Yes and no.
So I'm of two minds about this. One, scheduling is very hard for a lot of people. So I could see how that would be frustrating, right? If you just showed up and the person said, hey, surprise, I'm not running. Let's figure something else out. Now, if it's because you're not feeling well or you're not inspired that night or whatever, that stuff happens, right?
I just picture more of a like, okay, guys, I'm bringing this story arc to a close. I would really like a break. I would like to play in a game who feels like they could run something.
Right. Or you can even push it as a one shot and say, someone, to get the ball started. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, that's a good idea.
Things rolling.
Like baby steps. One shots are so much easier.
Yeah. So run a one shot, and then maybe I'll run a short game of 3 to 5 to 7 session kind of a thing, and then maybe another one shot or a 2 shot. Go from. So yeah, I think it's doable, but I think that there are a lot of resources out there now between podcasts and actual plays and books and blogs and magazines about storytelling as a craft and running games as a craft to get you off the ground faster. Maybe you won't.
I still the biggest barrier of entry beyond all of that is just doing it.
No, I agree.
Right? It's like public speaking, right? Like I can read lots of books about public speaking. I can write my speech ahead of time. That's helpful. I don't know that you would actually practice a role-playing game like you would a speech at a time. It'd be a little odd, but I guess
no, but I think that you could sit down and think about scenes that are likely to occur and how they kind of fit together and how different things would react. Now, I'm not a big fan of trying to make some kind of like big giant trouble tree decision map of where the story could go in every possibility. I'm not saying that. What I am saying though is that generally speaking, when you have a story in mind, you have maybe a couple, 3 or 4 big scenes, like set pieces that you think these are likely to come up in some kind of a way. And then what characters are in those? What are the possible outcomes to get the characters there? What are the possible outcomes after that scene happens? And think about those things and how they connect together, right? And the different moving pieces. And then that way I feel like you're more prepared for when something catches you off guard for how the world is going to react to this thing that has happened, right? But even outside of that, I think, and I understand the public speaking part of it and being nervous. I shouldn't say I understand. I get it to a point, but at the same time, I also, and maybe this is just me and then the way I've sort of internalized things is like, we had this thing where it's only an emergency if you're not prepared, right? It's what they beat into us in paramedic education, right? So, what it is you prepare for all this stuff, right? So all I'm saying is that if you have done the reading and prepared and know your stuff for what it is that this game you want to run, I'm not saying you shouldn't be nervous, but I'm saying there's a difference in being nervous, but being nervous and prepared. Do you know what I'm saying? What?
Okay, so there's only like so many meds you can give to somebody who's having some kind of cardiac problem.
Right.
You can literally come up with anything as a player. And I'm just going to be sitting there like, I did not see that coming.
Right.
What do I do now? And then your mind is a glorious blank. And if your mind hasn't been a glorious blank in that situation multiple times, as it be, when you've been in a gym for a while, then you panic.
I don't disagree.
And then you're nervous.
I don't disagree. Okay. What I'm saying, though, is that if you go into that situation having thought about some of this stuff, because I think sometimes writing things out is, I mean, if that's what works for you, then that's great. Then do that. But for me, I just like to sit and think about it. What are the possibilities, right? And then not even like specific possibilities, like what happens if they stab them or whatever, but like larger things. What happens? How does this antagonist react if things go bad for them, right? So whether the characters do something completely unexpected doesn't matter necessarily what it is. How does it affect the antagonist of the story, right? And it's sort of that way you're coming into it with that mindset, as opposed to, you don't have to have every detail mapped out, but you just have to have some kind of vague idea. How does this person solve their problems? Whatever that looks like. And then is this situation positive or negative for them? And that kind of stuff. And so I'm not saying that it will relieve all of the anxiety or nervousness that a person is going to have. But I do feel like it can sort of mitigate some of it, because at least at the end of the day, well, at least I thought about this. I'm not completely flying by the seat of my pants, right? You know what I'm saying? That's my only point. So I actually, when I first thought about this idea, I think it's really cool. I thought about it from the complete other side of this. I was thinking about it strictly from just the player's point of view, where some players are just more outspoken or proactive, however you want to say that at the table, right?
We see you. We hear you. Give somebody else
we
a turn.
definitely hear you. No, I'm kidding.
You're the ball hog of the RPG world. We love you, but
so when I had initially conceived of this, I thought about it more as on the player side of things, actually at the table, right? And learning that when we make our characters, let's just put this in a D&D context for right now, okay? Just to make the discussion part of it easier, right?
I'm going to be a fighter.
Exactly. So you're the fighter. Now, maybe in D&D, when you start to buy feats and stuff, you get some more overlap, right? But at least in an OSR context,
I only need 2 feet.
You know, in like the OSR context, like every class has their own little preserved area of expertise, right? Mm-hmm. So the fighters fight, the specialists know shit, the wizards cast spells, and the clerics are conduits of God, right? So, whatever. They're there. I mean, whatever. But like, it's very clear what that character's expertise is when you make that character in that context, right? So it's screaming right at you, right? But in some other games, it's a little more subtle, right? So when you make this character, what is it that you want to do with this character? If you've made the rogue and you've bought all the points and picking locks and sneaking and doing whatever, like that tells me what you want. So as however you want to say this, an alpha player or whatever, someone who's, takes more of the table time up, right? When those moments come where very clearly this is a rogue problem, let the rogue do this
Not
thing.
silly, I might cut that lock off.
Like that's what I'm talking about, is where you can be more of the foil to the other characters around the table by taking a step back and sort of using your, I don't want to say shortcomings, but the areas where your character doesn't have the expertise, you can use those areas to help another character shine. Does that make sense?
I would also say that for those characters that are really strong at the table, if you already have role playing down and you already have setting goals down and that's something you just slide easily into, then I would challenge you to not just make a relationship with the other characters at the table, which you should be doing anyway, but maybe make goals for that relationship. That way you're forced to bring those other people in an interactive kind of way. And
then when it comes to the background and that kind of stuff and connections with relationships, I would just, it's a delicate balance, I feel like, because if you're trying to step back a little bit to let them shine, one, you want your background or whatever your relationship looks like to be a little bit complicated so that there are moments that will come to light at the table, right? Mm-hmm. If it's just something flat like, oh, he's my brother and I always, whatever, back him up. Well, there's chances where that will come up, but like you need to find a way to sort of like in that, if you look at the playbooks in Apocalypse World, they do a really great job of asking questions about making the relationships complicated by the questions they're asking. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I'm saying? So something more along those lines to where it's going to draw out more, I don't know what, drama may be the wrong word, but I don't know what the right word would be.
No, I think drama's the perfect word.
So, well,
for what you're talking about.
And then it will create more colorful moments at the table that don't necessarily center around your character. And it also gives you a moment to sort of step back out of that to let someone else have those moments.
Make sure the other relationships that you're creating.
Well, that's when it's one of those little difficult things to sort of, how do you write that out to where I think I could see where it would be challenging to write a sort of a connection or a relationship or whatever, where it's a connection between two characters, but it's also putting more of the spotlight on them. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I don't think you even need to put more of the spotlight on them. And like, it's just going to change the nature of the interaction in a way that is more meaningful. And so the other person is going to be, forced to, but, there will be the abundant opportunity for them to get involved. I sort of picture it like when you set up relationships in Fiasco, right? Like you have the general relationship and then you have 2 or 3 modifiers for that relationship as well. So it's not just you're my brother. It's like we're my brother and we're both wanted criminals something like that. There's some kind of quantifier in addition to
so it has
just
like
the generic
a driver. I think
aspect.
In Fiasco, it's actually like, what's the relationship and then what's the motivation or drive or whatever. Right on, yeah. Yeah. I think that works really well to do that.
I think it would actually be really fun to notice.
Yeah, it could be
You
fun.
know, really interesting with that.
Right on.
And they're all right.
Do you have any other thoughts when it comes to player on player or character on characters, Limelight stuff?
So, I mean, it's pretty straightforward, really. Just pay attention, because I know some people don't realize that they're doing it. Like, pay attention to how much of the table you're monopolizing, and just realize that the story you're telling is going to be super cool, but the story somebody else, like, they're going to add things that wouldn't have even occurred to you. I don't know. It's just reading.
Right. And I think it's important to note that it's also on the player to make sure that they're paying attention to this, because sure, it's on the GM to do that as well and to sort of shift the spotlight around and all that kind of stuff, right? And that's all part of the job of being a storyteller or game master or whatever. But it's not just their job to pay attention to that and solve that problem. So if you know that you're that type of personality, that type of player, that's fine. Just go into the game knowing that, so that you can be ready for those moments to sort of shift things around when you can. You know what I'm saying? All right. So I've got one last thing here, which I just sort of came to me when we sat down initially, was thinking about this from the GM's perspective. And this is something that I realized when I first started editing our Night Witch's actual play, right? So when it's recorded, every person is recorded on a separate track. So I can see when someone is talking, right? So when you zoom out and you see the entire, whatever it is, 3-hour session, right? I can see when I'm talking, and I can see when you're talking, or Holly or Carrie or Taffy. And when I first started doing it, it really changed the way I tried to run games, because the first session, right? Granted, I'm trying to lay out the rules for you guys and get the game off the ground, but like, I could really see how much time I spent talking, because it's right there in my face, right? You can just see, this is, and so I saw that and I thought, that's interesting. But also, first game, you got to build the world, blah, 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 all that stuff, right? So I feel like in that case, especially with a brand new game, you're going to speak more than your players are, right? Plus that you are sort of trying to portray the entire world and whatnot and all that kind of stuff. But then after the second and third game, when I started seeing how much I was talking, I actively tried to reduce it, because it's like, I'm running this game for you guys. This is your game that you're playing in, so I need to shut up and get out of the way, right? And I really, at a certain point, tried to actively shut up, which is not easy for me, right? But it was one of those moments where sort of leaving things to hang out there in the air a little bit longer, to where you guys would discuss amongst yourself or figure out how you wanted to go about doing things, or there would just be a moment of a pause in the game, of a little bit of silence, and then it would prompt someone to be, oh, I forgot I had this thing that I have to get done, or whatever it is, and then it would be more interaction between you, all of you at the table, just as players, and less of me. And 9 sessions deep now into that game, and it's really been interesting, because I've done a lot of troubleshooting on myself through editing that game, right? Editing the audio of that game. And I don't know, it's hard to explain how to know when to get out of your own way. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, there's this whole saying about, people would succeed if they would just get out of their own way, right? And
I think there's a difference between GMing for newer players and more experienced, because I don't know, it just seems to me like, as a new player, you don't always know what to do. So it's helpful to have more talking part and more story and more kind of leading you along. But then you kind of, want to start seeing the boundaries and getting people start telling their own character more.
Right.
So.
Well, I think it also gets easier to do that as the characters have more of a history and understand the world and the moving pieces of it. So
to set up relationships and goals.
Yeah. Because I think now, as that game has progressed, I am just sort of sitting in a control panel and just sort of pulling the levers of what different people are going to react to things. And if I recall right, the vast majority of the game is just all of you sort of.
It's basically us coming to the most terrible situation for our character as a consequence of failure. You'd be like, oh, yes, I hear your suggestion and I raise you. Imminent death and doom.
I don't know. It's been an interesting experience doing that and realizing to just take a step back and get out of the way of doing that, right? But I don't know how well that works in setup for every game. And some games require more, like I said, depending on your players at your table or what the players know about the world out the gate and all that kind of stuff. So it's a fine line to try and find what that looks like. But I can absolutely say once you step out of that limelight as a GM and know when to step back into it, right? it can really change the dynamic of things at the table. And like you said, I think it's the best moment, or sort of one of the best compliments I've had as a game master, is that when you, Taffy, Holly, and Carrie have been talking about that game, you talk about how I'm just sort of like a facilitator, and it's like I'm not even there.
I'm just giving you a hard time.
No, but I really, at first I was like, oh man. But then I thought about it and I was like, no, that's what I'm like, as a storyteller, that's what you're trying to do. You're like, it should be me fading away and just presenting the world and helping tell a story. And your characters are what's happening, right? Because if you think about watching a movie or reading a book, well, the setting is always there. And that's what sort of gives tone and context to everything. But no one is watching Endgame to see the set, like, oh, look at how.
I like the narrator, though. Like in Lemony Snicket's.
Oh, yeah. No,
he
and those
pops in.
Yes.
And like, hey.
And those are the moments when you need to step forward and present more of the story and more of the background or whatever. But ideally, as a portion of the story, you should be sort of fading into the background and stepping away. I don't know. That game has made me change the way I see a lot of things for a lot of different games. This is just one way, I guess. So.
Oh, I think probably the biggest driver is just familiarity. Mm-hmm. Familiarity with the players as people. Do they know each other or don't they? Are they familiar with the world that you have established? If they're not familiar with it at all, then you're going to need more talking and more legwork to get them to understand what's going on. New character, old character. Have I ever played an RPG? Just the newer you are in any aspect, hands-on the gen ads get more solid, just stepping and giving up that line.
I think it'd be hard to do because you've already set the pattern that you're more of the story as the GM, right? And it can be hard to break that pattern to sort of start to step back and give more space because this is already the way you've been running the game. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so maybe, but...
No, I don't disagree. I'm just saying you just got to be... I think you just have to know that and know that, each game from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 is more sort of taking small steps back, right? And then as the story progresses, there might be situations in games where this story arc has brought itself to a close. So now it's more about setup again. So now I'm needing to be more, more narration by me and that kind of stuff. And then as gradually again, stepping back.
Both directions really bad. Like to be completely hands-on the entire time is a little bit of you just sort of like sitting there waiting to answer a question. Yeah. At the same time, if I sit down at the table and you're like, all right, we're going to play this Star Trek game. Okay, well, I've seen Star Trek 5 times 20 years ago, and you're like, and open sandbox, go. What are you doing? Right. And I'm like, cricket.
Phasers
I'm going to go get a snack.
Right. I'm going to change out of my red shirt. That's the only thing I know I need to do right now.
I have no idea. I have no goals or ambitions, and I don't know what's going on.
Right on. Well, should we bring that one to a close there? No, I think it's good, though. It's something that we haven't actually talked about and been kind of interesting. So, well... You heard me mention Night Witches, which is fresh in my mind because we're getting ready to record about 3 sessions worth of Night Witches this month. February is Night Witches month. Woo! So just sort of fresh in my mind. And we already have 2 episodes in the can that just need to be edited. So we're going to get back to editing those. It's kind of going to be a season 1, season 2 kind of a situation because just a long gap in editing and that kind of stuff. So look for those coming out the end of February probably. And
go ahead and start binge one now so that you're up to date.
So if you need to go back and catch up. And as I mentioned before, our Kickstarter going live on the 11th for our Three Sisters zine, which should be lots of fun. So if you're not familiar with our Three Sisters thing, not to rehash the whole thing, but you can go back to episode 140 and check that out. I'll link that in the show notes. And we'd love to see some support from all of you over there. Trying to trail off on that one. I don't know. The end. Yeah. Ta-da. So, and as you know, we are a member of the Gun and Geek Network, so you can head over to gunandgeeknetwork.com and check out all the geeky podcasts over there. My tongue is really tied today for some reason. And if you like what we do here at Just One More Fix, you can head over to patreon.com/JustOneMoreFix and support us over there and get access to all of our raw audio feeds and pre-shows, as well as our quarterly zine in print and PDF format, depending on what level you support at. And you can be awesome like all of our Patreon supporters, like Alan White, Simon McNair, Alistair H., Timothy Barra, Hector Trelane, Tiziano Furlano, and the OG Todd Olson. I think that'll do it for us this week, and we will see you all next week. Thanks for listening. This has been an episode of Just One More Fix. Music has been provided by Kevin MacLeod. You can find him at incompetech.com. You can support us at patreon.com/JustOneMoreFix or follow us on Twitter at JustOneMoreFix.